So Magda already a little bit presented our panelists today. And it's true, I would like also to use this opportunity to thank Joachim Rogal that he skipped the second part of this international conference that they are organizing in Bosch Stiftung to celebrate the 50th anniversary. Joachim has also, I would say, a personal touch with Poland, because not only that he was professionally connected with Polish-German relations. And I would like to remind you that Bosch Stiftung was present in Poland already in 1970s, was one of the first German foundations that started cooperating with Poland. But Joachim himself spent a year of his studies in Poznan University after the martial law in 1980s. And his family comes from Warmia, so he's also kind of Warmia and Mazury. Sorry, we call it Warmia and Mazury, but the family comes from Mazury. So I would like to thank you, Joachim, very much, and I will use this opportunity to wish Bosch Stiftung another 5 decades of fruitful and successful work in Germany, in Poland, and Europe, and globally. But apart from being one of the chief executives of Bosch Stiftung, Joachim is deputy chair of the Association of German Foundations, which is the oldest and the largest association of foundations. It was founded in 1948 as a consortium of Bavarian charitable and cultural foundations with mere 29 members. Today, Association of German Foundations represents about 3,900 members. So it's 1/5 of the whole foundation sector in Germany. And we all usually thought that, the charitable foundations are mostly developed in the United Kingdom, that the United Kingdom and the United States, this is the most ripe land for this kind of activity. So just to tell you that Association of Charitable Foundation UK has only 320 members, so much less than German one. Natalia Kaminarskaya is the executive director of the Russian Donors Forum, as Magda said. This forum, similarly as Polish Donors Forum, had been functioning as an informal association for a group of mainly, at that time, foreign donors since 1996, so 4 years longer than we did. And it became formally registered as an association in 2002. Currently, Russian Donors Forum has 42 members, including 8 corporations, and except 3, all members are Russian entities. Before assuming this position, Natasha worked for the Charitable Aid Foundations Russia, where she was responsible for Community Foundation program, and probably with a great success, because today they have 30 community foundations in Russia. Natasha served also as the member of the coordinating committee of the Donors Association of Foundations and Network in Europe, called DAFNE, and she's a member of the working group on philanthropy of the Russian Public Chamber. And now we come to Jerry Selol, who's the chief executive of the European Foundation Center, which I have the honor and pleasure to chair for 3 consecutive years. But it's basically him who is doing the work. I'm there only to represent, I hope. European Foundation Center is an international membership association of foundations and corporate funders active in philanthropy in Europe. EFC was set up by 7 leading European foundations in 1989 as an answer to the new opportunities and changes the first elections in Poland and then the fall of Berlin Wall had brought to Europe. Today, EFC has 230 members from 40 different countries, and Jerry Selol served as the EFC chief executive since 2005. I would like to stress here that under his leadership, EFC underwent significant structural changes. It developed new programs and new areas of interest, and it doubled its membership. Before joining EFC, Jerry worked as the development program officer in different international and foreign organizations like Save the Children, Federation US, Oxfam UK, or United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. He has also been the program officer of the Ford Foundation's representative in the Southern Africa. So after this short presentation of our panelists, I would like to start our discussion with the point at picking up the point which was made by the panelists of the previous session, which basically complained a little bit about too low social capital and not particularly mature philanthropic structure to sustain civil society development. And I would like to mention that we have right now in Poland, as Tomasz Szymanek said, 100,000 NGOs, mainly associations, also voluntary fire brigades, and 11,000 foundations, including over what our research showed, 100 corporate foundations, and we have 27 community foundations, so a comparable number to the Russian ones. So it seems, because there are a lot of different anniversaries in Poland, that during this 25 years of our, a quarter of a century of our democratic country, and also 25 years of rebirth of the Polish civil society sector, we have some successes. There is the civil society sector is diverse, it's robust, but the philanthropic structure is not that developed. At least I have a feeling that I'm not very much satisfied with the way it is. Out of these 11,000 foundations that we have, and the rate is quite good when you compare it to the number of foundations in Germany, which is a little bit bigger country than ours, with 20,000 foundations there, or 30,000 foundations in much bigger Russia. Our foundations are different animals. Most of them are grant-seeking and fundraising foundations. There are very few foundations with capital. Very few foundations that provide financial or material support to civic initiatives, to the public or private institutions, or to individuals. We do not have, I would say, practically, when you look at it, there are very few foundations with endowments. And those that have endowments, a few of them, none of them, or maybe except one, was set up by the private individual, wealthy individual, based in Poland. I'm not talking about Soros because it's a different kind of thing. Yes. So, though we observe right now in Poland, I would say, kind of renaissance of civic activism, especially among young people, and it's also proved by the data. Each year, about 1,000 new foundations are created, and the last year it was 1,700. So it's really a big record when you compare it to the rate in which the German foundations are created. It's more than double, and in the case of the last year, it's even 4 times more. But again, when you look at how much money is in the foundation sector, it's something that we cannot even compare ourselves with one of the foundation with capital in Germany. So also what is proved by our membership, we have only 24 members. Only, or you can call it only, or you can say it's a lot. It's not a lot. You have the Russian Foundation has 42. We have 24, and of course the reason for this is that it's very difficult to fulfill our membership criteria, as it seems. It's difficult to find foundations that have 300,000 zlotys annual budget for grants. So it really shows something, 300,000 Polish zlotys, so it's roughly 80,000 euros. So stopping here, I would like, because we Poles, we really love to complain, and we always see a glass half empty and not half full. That's why I would like to ask our 2 neighbors, the eastern and the western one. What is the situation in your countries? Is this deficit of institutional private donors a Polish idiosyncrasy, or is it a manifestation of some more general phenomenon? Is it, as our panelists say, a feature of the countries with relatively short tradition of philanthropy and civic engagement, a result of the lack of accumulated personal wealth? Should we wait another 25 years to build philanthropy, or even more, or can we do something now? So, Natasha, what is the state of philanthropy in Russia?
Dobry. First of all, I would like to say thank you for inviting me to participate in this celebration. And I would like to congratulate the Donors Forum members, the board, and the staff definitely with the 10th anniversary. And wish you another, not 10 and not even 50, but more and more years of growing and developing philanthropy in Poland. And I also would like to add congratulations from our colleagues from Daphne, who are going to come in next winter to Warsaw. And the chair of Daphne, Rosa Galiaga, is sending her personal greetings and congratulations to the Donors Forum staff. Back to a question, Eva. You know, I was listening to the previous debate and thinking I'm sitting in Moscow, like with my members and discussing very similar issues. And it's continuous and continuous. We're going through different circles and tackling different angles of this debate. Why philanthropy is developing that slowly? What are the reasons? Is it culture? Is it communist era that influenced us? Or is it something else? There is no simple answer, I would say. We found that all these issues are valuable and influenced the current situation because similar to what's going on in Poland when the Soviet Union collapsed and the freedom, I would say, no one was talking about civil society as a part where the non-profit sector acting a significant part, and only Western donors came to the country to support us developing this new for us type of institutions and behavior, and for many, many years there were mainly Western donors developing it in Russia and not Russian donors. And even now, if you look at what Russian corporations and private foundations support, it's quite special things. Having said that, I would say that at the moment, surprisingly, philanthropy is at the rise in Russia. It's one of the less developed but less controlled sector. And so there are a lot of opportunities as well as challenges in the development of philanthropy. I would say that just recently we held a number of researchers as well as all the Donors Forum, I think, are doing. And we can say that over half of population now participating in some sorts of civic activism, either volunteering in the community or donating small money to, not charity, but individually to some causes and issues that are close to the heart of citizens. And it's a great development because if you look at the philanthropy index, Russia is in the 126th place in the world. So we're not proud of it, but we are working on it. Another important development is the growth of information about philanthropy in the country. We measure the number of publications in media on covering philanthropy issues and foundations activities. It grows approximately 15-20% a year. And we started in 2006 with 0. So you can imagine, so the first year it was like 100, and then another 15, and then another 100, and then another something. So now philanthropy is becoming a normal topic in the media, which I think is a very important development. And more neutral and positive materials are arising in the media rather than negative, although they exist for sure.
And who are the Russian philanthropists? Who is setting up foundations in Russia? Is their number growing? Are these wealthy individuals? Are these ex-politicians? Are these social activists, actors, celebrities?
If you look at the recent history, there were a few waves of different types of foundations arising. First were wealthy individuals. They started at the end of 90s, beginning of 2000, and they set up about 20, 30 very big foundations with the issues that were quite understandable by the public. For example, supporting education or talented people or sports or culture. That can be accepted, that can be understandable, and the society would accept it easily. Then there was a kind of a gap, and no new institutions arose. And the last 3-5 years, a new wave of foundations is being created. And surprise, surprise, these are corporations Out of 60 participants of our Top Corporate Award, 50 has their corporate foundations now, not necessarily as separate individual entities independent from corporations, but still operating foundations. And another track and another trend is celebrities establishing foundations. This is also understandable because the major challenge in philanthropy is lack of trust. And if someone well-known is ready to put his name and face in association with an entity, it would raise trust and it would raise money for certain issues. So it's mainly fundraising foundations which are now being set up for different issues and different reasons. If this is an answer.
What is the situation in Germany? You have 20,000 foundations, and almost what I just learned, and it's particularly interesting for me, is that 70% of them were founded after 1989. So it seems that during this 25 years, much more foundations were created than the years before. So who is establishing these foundations in Germany, and in which spheres are they most active, and what is their modus of operandi?
First of all, I would congratulate the Donors Forum in Poland for its 10th anniversary. I know what it means to have anniversaries. This year we are 50, so congratulations to the younger in the family. And of course from the German foundations I'm representing here. It is proud to have a developing foundation scene in Poland, and we hope we have a lot of cooperation in the future with Polish foundations. Coming to the situation of foundations in Germany, I would say that Germany has, as to the legal framework, one of the most donor-friendliest environments in Europe. So it is rather astonishing that we don't have as much new foundations as, for example, you have here in Poland. We have a lot of new foundations, but it's not as you have it in Poland. And what is especially astonishing is that perhaps it's not astonishing, only 7% of the foundations registered in Germany are in the former GDR. And this is also representative for the new foundations. Only about 7% of the new foundations are funded in former GDR in Eastern Germany. And perhaps in general, this is, of course, complaining on a very high level, which is a speciality of us Germans. When we complain, it's on a very high level. But I think this lack of foundations growing is also a part of social development. We now have a phase where the generations who build it up, Western Germany especially, giving back their fortune to the society, to their heirs, and they spend it not only for villas in Tuscany, but they are funding new foundations. So I think we will have in the next decade a lot of new foundations by rather rich people, inherited the fortune by their ancestors. This is what makes me optimistically to the development of the German foundation scene. But we still have in Germany, like in other countries, a lack of initiative, because in Germany this is a development that people don't wait for the government to organize everything. They learn, and they learn it more and more, that government alone isn't able to conquer all the gaps and all the situations in society. So individuals have more and more the obligation and the opportunity to collaborate with the government and to make their own initiatives. What is foundation business? So after the reunification, the eastern part of Germany had nearly the same situation as in Poland, but I think sometimes this big solidarity, giving Western support for Eastern Germany, didn't create a climate that in these territories there was a genuine development of funding, and so I think this is rather the negative side of this big solidarity from Western Germany to Eastern Germany. And in general, I would say this foundation business grows especially in the local areas where we have a lot of community foundations. This is amazing. We have 260 community foundations now in Germany, starting in 1996 with the first community foundation in Gütersloh. So this is really a development where the local people donate small amounts of money for the development of their environment, their town, their region. So this is where the people see most of these benefits coming from such a community foundation in their own environment, and that makes it very popular, and I think it will grow in the years to come even more.
So we see there is a pattern, and the diagnosis of our academia people from the first panel proved to be true also in other parts of Europe. The lack of tradition is something that plays an important role. The kind of lack of to the fact that there is not enough civil activism, but also the lack of accumulated wealth. It's important. You have to get some wealthy businessmen or wealthy people first, and then they will be willing to do their share to the society. But Jerry, could you tell us what are the current philanthropic trends in Europe and globally? Because some people say that foundations are a song of past. They say that there are some new philanthropic structures that are more effective, that maybe there is no demand for foundations anymore. Maybe there is a kind of crisis in the foundation community, and the new forms of philanthropy will be developed with also kind of new technology, possibility of different kind of communication for people. What would you say about the trends over there?
Thank you. Happy birthday, everybody. I'm not entirely convinced that lack of tradition is really the problem. I come from Africa, and I've been helping develop African philanthropy in the last couple of years. And frankly, I don't think many Africans could get to school, could get to university, if it wasn't for very local pooling efforts on the parts of communities. And so I just think it's problematic if you are always aspiring to a kind of philanthropy that's somewhere else. And I think that's really one of the problems we have to begin to confront. I was struck in the previous panel that all the examples we had were from the United States. So here we are, we have a myriad of European types of foundations, and still in our head somewhere is the model of the United States and philanthropy as it was established by a capitalist system. So, of course, if philanthropy as we know it and recognize it is a product of a capitalist system, you would expect then places where there isn't that kind of an economy or capital or tradition to be weaker in that particular kind of philanthropy. But whether then you can deny that there is philanthropy of another kind is problematic for me. So when I first came to the EFC, we had at the EFC a 27-page document classifying European foundations. And every time we met a new foundation that wanted to join the EFC, we created another subcategory. And we decided this was crazy, so we tried to simplify what our definition of a foundation is. And I've been struck by how blind we are to different kinds of foundations in our midst. So, for example, I always can talk about the Bosch Foundation as the owner of a company that's doing philanthropic work. Every time you buy a fridge or you buy one of these gadgets we're listening to the translation on, you are doing a philanthropic act. Because at the end of the day, the money is being spent philanthropically. Because Bosch owns the company.
I have heard.
The Carlsberg Foundation in Denmark is the same. It's owned by the foundation, and therefore every time you drink a beer, you are performing a philanthropic act. If it's Carlsberg. Yes, so I hope we'll get lots of Carlsberg tonight. But the other examples I have are of foundations that have been in existence for over 500 years. So we have several members of the EFC, but Germany has examples, Italy has examples, the UK has examples of foundations that have survived 500, 400, 300 years and have changed. So I have a definition of foundations, and then I'll stop there and maybe give the floor. It's my personal way I define European foundations. Foundations are many, they are varied, they are ever-changing and eternal. Classifying them is similar to trying to describe and contain a many-headed hydra, which every time a neck is severed, sprouts a head even more slippery and varied than before. You are defining that which is unfixed, mutating, and unboxable. And the problem with that is that we're working in a legal context where the legal forms are always behind. They're always behind. And if foundations are a form of civil society, they are likely to be inventing new ways of working all the time. And some of the foundations that I am totally amazed by are the foundations that have very small money, swimming pool amounts of money, but use that swimming pool money in order to move the sea money that governments and corporates have. That's our job as an association, is to defend the concept of a small player that's using its resources well and worrying about where the money comes from rather than what you do with the money is an obsession of foundations that I don't understand. I really don't. We spend too much time worrying where does the money come from and less time worrying about what do we do with it.
Okay, so my other questions to everybody in the panel is, so what do we need foundations for? What is it so special about them? What they can do that others cannot do?
I think, okay. Foundations are the intermediary between the citizens and the state. They are, in my understanding, a sort of corporate citizenship, which is presenting the partner for the government in dealing with our everyday problems. And we see that foundations made of all these citizens, they really have the insight where the real problems are. And they see the lack of efficiency by state-organized actions. So they could be, like that? Okay. They could be inspiring, they could be identifying, they could be finding allies for all these problems. And I think they are, of course, they have their own right to deal with these problems. They are not a concurrency to the state, and they are not the opposition to the state. They are the natural allies, and they combine, they concentrate the plans and wishes of the citizens versus the state, and so I think they are the missing link between the government and the individual, and they have even more potential in the future, because the state has nor the money nor the ideas to deal with all these problems. So they need us. They need us as the pain in the ass, because they think if everything is organized by the state, it's okay. But it's not okay. We see the lacks, we see the deficits better than the people in the ministries, and we have to point to the the areas where we have solutions, where we try to find solutions, and we can be risky. The state is always careful because he has a lack of money, and if he invests the money in the wrong place, he will be criticized. The foundations have their own money, and they can take a risk, and we just try. We give them the opportunity to show if it's going, and if it's not going, we are only responsible for our own money, not for the money of others. And the legitimacy of foundations is by itself. It's every individual, and a rich individual who spends money or is funding a foundation, he has the right to give it for this purpose he seems appropriate. And the government is sometimes a bit not writing the right conditions for these actions because they see it as concurrency. I think this will in the future be the opportunity for the state to be, as a state, more efficient in dealing with the civil society represented by foundations.
If I may add a small picture from my experience, because that's the conversation I usually have with the individuals that are struggling with whether to set up a foundation or not. Because they say, well, why don't we do it through the company if we are the company owners? Or why don't we just support in people in need or specific institutions we are in favor of for some reason? And I have another picture. Not just between the foundation is not something between the state and the citizens. I think it's a much more complicated, like mechanical watch inside mechanism. There's so many instruments and pieces in it, but the mechanism would not work if you're lacking one portion of it. And I always say that the foundation, as well as the donor associations, are the parts of this infrastructure and this mechanical mechanism. It would work if it's all in place.
You have to know that Jerry, except for being development officer and the chief executive of the European Foundation Center, is also a poet. What you already probably learned from the piece he read to you. But I would like to quote another favorite saying of Jerry. He likes to say that foundations act like acupuncturists, applying just the right amount of pressure to just the right areas. So what role, Jerry, do you see for the foundations in the society? What should they do to make the art of acupuncture really effective?
I'm obsessed with the fact that I think we have to make a case for the foundation model in its diversity to be a very effective way of bringing about serious, sustainable change. And so for me, the question of everybody knows that we don't have enough money, and we're unlikely to have enough money in the coming future. So we really have to learn how to guard this, what I call swimming pool money, and use it very effectively. We therefore need independence from government. We need the freedom to make mistakes, to risk money, to go down paths that are wrong and come back from that. And we need to be able to share that in a very safe environment. And that's what we're trying to do at the EFC, is to try and create an atmosphere where foundations can talk about errors, mistakes, lessons learned, and then move forward. But the acupuncture for me has to be, the body has to be willing to receive the needles. And the problem is that at the moment, the state, which is part of the body, they are looking at foundations as if they are possibly replacement money bags for them. And that's really the wrong end of the stick. Because all the money, all the foundations have, even if we put Wellcome and Gates in that pot, is not going to be anywhere near what the state has. So I agree with Joachim, the state thinks it doesn't have money, but it's the only real source for funds. So the only way foundations have going forward is to be able to make the case to governments that they are better at handling resources. And I can find 20, 30, 40 examples of foundations in Europe that have made the case to their own governments and are now trusted to use government funding. So, in other words, the obsession with separating private money from public money is also a thing of the past. Increasingly, we're seeing blurred entities that have used their own resources to prove a particular way of working, and then governments come and say, okay, we'll give you the money to do it. The Bernard Van Leer Foundation, the King Baudouin Foundation, the Ford Foundation even now, are receiving resources from other sources because somebody says, we trust the way you work, let's give you the resources to do it. If I'm not wrong, the Stefan Batory Foundation is also in that group. And that's, I think, the way of the future. That we have a great model of how things can work, and we need to convince those with the money to give it to us because we are good, trusted intermediaries. We know the local context.
But from what you say, there's a kind of obligation for the foundations, which I'm not sure that all of us are aware of. If we are going to be trusted, we have to do something in order to win this trust. So what should the foundations do to gain this trust? And what is the role of the associations of foundations like yours in helping them to do that? Who wants to be the first to answer the question?
Just to finish a thought, because I wanted to say this, actually, when I was listening this morning, I wanted to react to one of the things I heard. We have to get off the high moral ground. So one of the things I think we do too much of is talk about the moral space we occupy, that we are doing good. I think we have to be taking another space. We are doing things more efficiently. We are doing things in a more logical way. We can show results. But we can't say we are doing good, you are not. And the subtext of some of what foundations speak is we're holding on to a moral ground that I'm not sure we can justify. And one of the things we have to do is begin to show that we can be more efficient or more effective.
That we have to be more professional. I think the thought of Jerry, that we have to build the trust that we can do things is also based on the conviction that this organization, this foundation, is really as professional as an enterprise in investing and gaining results. So we have to show that we have professional staff, we have dealing with our resources like everybody else who is responsible for spending money, and we have to evaluate what we are doing, the impact that we are creating. Sometimes we are just talking about an impact we feel in our stomachs, but we can't prove it really. That will be challenged by other competitors in this field. We have to be better than others, more efficient. I totally agree, and I think we can this because we are normally small organizations and we don't have enough money. Even a big foundation always has a lack of money for all the things we want to do. So it is it needs our geniality to find the right way of investing the money that we gain more out of it by channeling other sources, public sources, other private sources to the goals we are establishing. I think this is the future that we will have the organizations we represent here to provide other smaller foundations with that professionality. The big foundations already have mostly, but the smaller foundations can't have because they are so small, they don't have the professional stuff, and we can provide some services for them to make their efforts more efficient.
If I may add to this, actually I was looking at the list of challenges the Polish Donors Forum listed for yourself in the coming years. I can subscribe under it because the situation in Germany would be, even in former GDR, comparing to Poland and Russia would be different. We're just in lack of this professional infrastructure and philanthropy. We don't have enough institutions, not only foundations, but non-profit organizations as our partners and members in development civil society, in providing social services to the population. It's a bit early to talk about being that kind of a provider and supporter of the state in provision of these services. And I can say for Russia that all private foundations would be happy to have state money. And most of the projects they start, they're trying to sell it back to the state. They develop it and they believe that the state should come after and continue working it. It doesn't work all the time this way. But I would say that there is a role, a specific role for the associations of foundations in our countries in building this trust, in supporting development in sufficient infrastructure in the society, in our countries. And for this we have to continue our awareness building campaigns and add a lot of public debate on, I would say, values of philanthropy. And I was happy to hear in the morning that a minister was mentioning the values of philanthropy, because in Russia we never talk about it. For the first time this year, our own conference about values and motivation for philanthropy, because it's a kind of a closed topic. Everyone believes philanthropy is good, but why and how and what it gives to society, what it gives to individuals, what it gives to the country. So I think this is the role for associations, to continue this hard debate and to push forward, and sometimes to stand up and show the case and be the ones who implement the stories and the ideas and lead the foundations be with us.
Then if I can sum it up, that we need foundations because they have something which the other actors, and especially the public state, does not have, that is ability to take risk, to act quickly, but also long-term, to invest in new ideas and innovative out-of-box solutions or just alternative solutions, to experiment, to play the role of facilitators, of bringing to the table different stakeholders. And is there some specific role for foundations right now in this epoch of permanent crisis? We have such big challenges that are not particularly connected with a given country. It's the European or rather even global challenges. Just to name the few, it's high unemployment, aging societies, growing social disparity and inherited poverty problems connected with the big influx of groups to the hitherto, let's say, homogeneous social fabric. I'm talking about migrants, both in the European Union and to the European Union. Climate change, digital exclusions, you can name them. What tools and approaches can foundations use to use the resources in the most effective way and in such a way that it will guarantee the best possible solutions?
One way is sharing best practice and collaborating effectively internationally. Just an example, the Bosch Foundation wants to make a difference dealing with youth unemployment in Southeastern Europe. So we're looking for allies, foundations, and companies like ours, and the government to give some incentives and inventing some new instruments for dealing with this. So we need experts, we need expertise. We don't have to make all the faults others have already made. So I think this is important, that we share the experiences internationally, and the Americans have their own experience. We Europeans have a lot of experience in foundation business, so we don't have to look always across the Atlantic, but of course we have to look over the Atlantic also. I don't think that it should be exclusively a European approach. This is all old-fashioned. When I started in the foundation business, the tendency to autism in the foundation community was overwhelming. There were it was like an assembly of artists. Everybody wanted to make his own business card with his actions. This was changing because the problems foundations tried to deal with were such that even big foundations couldn't do it by their own. So I think we have this growing coalition business in the foundations and EFC, and the others here represented are just doing that, giving service and bringing people together, networking in that the community of foundations. And I think that's what we can do dealing with these big challenges of ours now.
Sure. I mean, I think all of us, especially back to the birthday people, all associations really do four things. They bring their members together in a safe space so they can share experience. They fight for a legislative environment that's conducive to the creation of more foundations. And they are trying to tell the story of what their members do in as simple way as possible. And, you know, occasionally they will also maybe identify trends or spot gaps. And clearly, the most effective associations have to be ones that begin to create a space for the creation of consortia and pooled resources so that foundations can work safely together. And I think EFC, but all the other associations are always trying to create such space. So I think that's the future. Back to the issue of what do we do around really relationships between governments and foundations and so on. I think one of the big pressures at the moment is a crisis in confidence in Europe. And when you talk about, the youth unemployment issue, the EFC is trying to do something with, Polish foundations, with Italian foundations, with Spanish and Portuguese and German foundations, in order essentially to show people that people haven't quite given up on Europe. And this is really a bad time. So I think to some extent, foundations also have to see their role in keeping this European project alive, because I think we're really running some risks also in the current commission of really having some political difficulties. And so one of the things the EFC has decided it wants to do, and we need the help of everybody in this room and everywhere else really, is we need to start looking also for ways in which other assets can be identified. This work that Lester Solomon did on the private philanthropification through privatization, which is essentially to identify some 500 institutions around the world that were created by governments choosing. This is also connected to the conversation you were having this morning. By governments choosing not to take money into their own budget, but to create an entity that will look after either research funding, as in the case of the Polish Science Foundation, or as in the case of the Volkswagen Foundation, or the Italian banking foundations. Some of the biggest foundations in Europe are privatized foundations. This is a part of our reality, and we should be looking for other assets like this that could be turned into strong foundations for all of us.
Touched upon something which is a conversation that we are carrying out here in Poland, how to build private funding for the civil society initiatives. And one of our ideas was to convince the government to use this the part of the 1% that was not designated by the Polish taxpayers to make a pool of money that will be managed, administered, and spent by the NGO sector for the civic initiatives in Poland. So it was an executive idea to privatize some of the public money and do some, and let's say make up for the time that was lost when, for example, in Czech Republic there was this decision to use some fraction of from the privatization to set up endowment foundations. How important it is, especially in our region right now, is demonstrated by what's happening in Hungary, where quite probably in a few months we will be quite a big pool of foundations missing from the landscape, because the government that decided to take the illiberal kind of path democracy, decided just to do away with those organizations that it feels is critical of their doings, but it's basically the watchdogs, the monitoring, the human rights organizations, and probably the next will be environmental organizations, and then like the salami tactics, all those that are not obedient and compliant. So this is another case which shows that we cannot rely on public funds. We cannot be happy with the kind of political arrangement that we have right now in Poland, and that we are really appreciated by both the president and the current or the previous cabinet, because this can change. This can change in Romania, in Bulgaria, it can change in Poland. So it's another kind of a strong argument for having private funding available to provide support for different kinds of civic initiatives and to be independent. So thank you very much. And
thank you.